morning, everybody. Good to see you guys. I see a lot of my friends that I've seen over the past years. I was thinking about what to talk about today, and only the best companies in the world have really figured out how to overcome little Q thinking and begin big Q thinking. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, how to take your management system and make your management system work for you. One of the first things that we did several months ago, and several of you guys responded to the survey that we sent out. We sent out a survey asking you guys what you wanted to know more about. Kind of a novel concept, right? Yeah, really. Interested parties, the standard talks about interested parties. Well, you guys would be interested parties for me, so it seemed to me to be a good thing to see what you guys wanted to cover. 80% of the responses came back. That's about 4 out of 5 of the responses came back saying that you guys wanted to know some stuff about risk-based thinking. Who struggles with the risk-based thinking? Oh, come on.
They all got it figured out. I'd like a little help.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic, Thomas. So you and me, all right?
Oh, we got it.
Yeah, we got it. We got it right here. So 80% of you guys wanted to know about risk-based thinking. About a little bit over 3 out of 5 of the responses came back saying that they needed to know something about process auditing and management review and how to take both of those things to the next level. And about half of the responses that we got said that we really don't understand the difference between correction and corrective action. That's kind of surprising, I suppose. But I want you guys to keep in mind over the next several minutes here that we've got together. Keep in mind that there's a lot of different ways to meet the requirements of the 9001 standards. We're going to present a couple of possibilities here in our time together, but just remember there's a lot of different ways to meet the requirements. In the interest of precise communication today, we want to really point out the difference between big Q thinking and little Q thinking. The big Q concepts, they were identified many years ago by Joseph Juran, the big Q concepts. And part of the confusion that people have with 9001 and applying 9001 is they try to apply it while they are little Q thinking. The big Q, it also includes the little q plus a whole lot more. The big Q thinking includes all the little q stuff plus additional organizational matters, additional supporting administrative processes that are not included in the little q thinking. While big Q ideas have been around for a long time, many organizations really miss the benefits of that can be achieved by big Q thinking and big Q processes. And from a management standpoint, focusing on the little q is counterproductive to the organization. If the organization desires to be prosperous for more than just a few years, a more strategic approach is needed. That's the big Q thinking. In 9001, Clause 5 talks about the responsibilities of top management. A couple of the clauses, you guys will recall a couple of the clauses in 5.1.1. Top management is required to demonstrate leadership by ensuring integration of the quality management system requirements into the organization's business processes. That's certainly big Q thinking, and that's word for word right out of the 9001 standard. In addition, top management is responsible for demonstrating leadership by promoting the use of the process approach and risk-based thinking. So, from last year, who was in last year's presentation? Holy smokes, and you guys came back? Outrageous. Like I was telling somebody earlier, you can get me once by accident. This is on purpose for you guys. Who was not here last year and did not hear last year's stuff? Oh, good. So there's quite a few from that did not hear last year's presentation. One of the things that we talked about early on last year, I just gave you guys a snapshot out of 4.4.1 in the standard, and no, I am not going to read the standard to you. You guys can do that on your own, and I wish you would. In that standard, you'll recall that we did a little bit of wordsmithing, those of you that were here last year. We did a little bit of wordsmithing on the standard. We did some changing around in that second paragraph right there. The organization shall determine the processes needed to run the business. So I'm also a lead auditor for a certification body. You guys would be amazed if I told you the number of companies that I go into and I ask them, hey, because I'm from Tennessee, right? Hey, what processes does it take to run this business? And the response I get back is, huh, what? Well, the standard, early in the standard, it talks about figuring out the processes needed to run the business and how those processes apply throughout the organization. Okay, that's right out of 4.4.1, early in the standard, and that is certainly big Q thinking. When it says that word right there, throughout, you know what that means? It means throughout. Front to, yeah. If we had meant it to mean something else, we would have written the standard a different way. We'd have said, hey, determine the processes needed to run the business in the production department. But that's not what we said. It's throughout the business. And also remember, last year, those of you that were with us last year, we looked at 9 steps. 9 key steps. Anybody remember that from last year? Bueller. Come on, I'm not like this. I'm not like these other guys. I'll come and stand next to you. Anybody remember that from last year? The 9 steps required to run a business and implement 9001. Remember, we did some wordsmithing with those things, and we changed the order. Back. Right here is just copied and pasted right out of the 9001 standard, right there. And what we did a little wordsmithing, and we changed the order of things. So we took it. The first step that we looked at last year was figure out the processes, determine the processes needed to run the business, and how they apply throughout the organization. See that right there? Throughout, that's the big Q thinking. All right? The second step, assign process owners. So you guys ask yourself, have you guys done this at your companies? Do you know what processes are required to run your business? Who are the process owners? That would be step number 2. And you can kind of track on the end of each one of these. I put the references from the 9001 standard. You guys can look it up on your own. All right? Step 3, have top management, along with the process owners, figure out what the sequence of the processes are and how those processes interact together. That was the 3rd step. The 4th step was to have the process owners determine the inputs required and the outputs that are expected from those processes. That's 441A. The 5th thing, have the process owners, because see, you've assigned process owners up here in step number 2, the process owners that own the processes required to run the business. Have the process owners address risks and opportunities with each of the inputs for the processes. We're going to spend some time on that here in just a minute, and I'll give you some tools to use. Okay? 6th, determine and apply the criteria and the methods, the measures, the metrics, all of the things that are required to ensure that the processes work. And that includes all of the documented information that you may or may not have in your processes. 7th, we said to determine and provide resources that are needed for the processes. 8th, audit the processes. That's 441G. And then finally, the 9th thing. Yeah, now would be a good time if you want to take the pictures of the camera stuff. Yeah.
There we go.
There you go. You'll have to crop that out. Yeah, those are the 9 steps in the order that a lot of people are really finding helpful. Over the last year, those 9 steps have really had a tremendous impact on hundreds of people that have contacted me and said, hey, you know, if I just follow the recipe, the 9 steps, it's really making a huge difference in our companies. So we shuffled the order a bit. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on step number 1. Determine the processes needed to run the business and how they apply throughout the organization. Well, what processes would those be? And they're going to be different for each one of your companies. Okay? Here's some examples right here. Here's little Q thinking. A lot of people will tell me, hey Dale, 9001 only applies to the production processes. Well, it applies to the production processes, all right. But it applies to a whole lot more than just the production processes. Okay? That is little Q thinking right there. Remember we said that big Q includes the little q plus many, many other requirements as well, right? Okay, so what processes would be required to run the business? Well, you've got customer-oriented processes, processes that are focused on the customer, things like the quotation process, the order entry process, the design process, procurement, production, distribution, billing. You know, somebody told me one time, billing and accounting, that's not included in 9001. Really? So you build stuff, you ship it, and you don't bill for it. How's that going to be for cash flow? Right? So all of those are customer-oriented processes. You have management-oriented processes, things like planning and how to determine the context of the organization, interested parties. We spent a lot of time last year looking at context and interested parties. Internal audit, management review, those are clearly management-oriented, management-controlled type processes. And then you've got support processes down here. The people management process. Hey, that might include something like the new hire process. You ever hire anybody new in your company? And sometimes, oh yeah.
Just old people.
That's it. Well, somebody was asking me about Dale's rules, and I really didn't put any in this presentation, but that one reminds me of a Dale's rule that says never bring home anything that eats. It applies to pets, children, employees, right? Well, so the new hire process, that would be a process of people management. You've got infrastructure, environment, measurement, metrology. All of those processes, guys, I just picked some processes. If I was in a different sector, maybe healthcare or something like that, those processes would look different, right? And they're probably going to look different for you guys as well. So all of those processes are required to run the business, and now we need to look at how they apply, and that's how they apply throughout the organization right there. So let's take one of those processes. I just pulled some of the processes from that first line. We're going to apply risk-based thinking to the process. Let's pick the purchasing process. It's right there in the middle. We could pick any of them, okay? We're going to apply risk-based thinking, and then next we'll talk about process auditing and how that works in a business. Well, remember, 4 out of 5 of the responses said that you guys wanted to know about risk-based thinking. All right, so here we go. Right out of the 9001 standard, clause 6.1, actions to address risks and opportunities. Okay, down in 6.1.2, if you highlight a couple of key words in that section right there. Okay? You've got risks, integrate, actions, and processes. If you highlight some of those key words right there and string them together, now here's how you read 6.1.2. The organization shall plan how to integrate risk-based actions into the processes. What processes? Yeah, the ones required to run the business. It gives you a hint right there. It says C4.4.4. Now that's big Q thinking right there. Okay, so here's one way to apply risk-based thinking to a process. Let's take our purchasing process. Okay, the purchasing process. Again, who's going to do this? The process owners. The process owners are going to do it. Who understands the processes better than the process owners? Would you tell me that? Yeah, I heard it's the people that do the processes on a day-to-day basis. They understand the processes. They understand what's going on. All right? Step number 2, assign process owners. That's why that's so critical. All right? So the purchasing process. The purchasing process owner. Who might be the owner for the purchasing process? The purchasing manager. Okay? So the purchasing manager. They look at how is the purchasing process done? Are there any process controls? Do they have any procedures, any work instructions, any documentation, forms that they use? What are the supporting processes for the purchasing process? Well, let's see. There might be the supplier qualification process, the vendor qualification process. That's probably one, right? Yeah. Incoming, receiving, inspection at the back end. That's a supporting process, right? Okay. What resources do I require to run my purchasing process? Well, any hardware, software, computer systems. Environment, well, there's no environmental conditions necessarily for the purchasing process. I guess air conditioning. But yeah, there's really none. But if we replaced purchasing with calibration, well, environmental conditions, that's going to play a big role in the calibration process, isn't it, guys? Yeah, sure. Guys, just shout them out when you know them. It's okay. We're among friends here. Yeah. Who is responsible for the purchasing process, and how do I know that they're competent? Wait a minute, I have a buyer that's competent. They've got a degree in metallurgy, and so they know all the different types of metals and steels and all of that kind of stuff. But you know what? They're really not that competent on electronic components or computer systems, right? Okay? So I need to get that person that's doing the procurement of the computer systems, maybe get them some help. Maybe they team up with the IT person or something. What are the measurements and what are the metrics that exist with that process? You take those risks that the process owners have identified. Does this make sense, guys? You guys okay with it so far? Everybody good?
Yes.
Everybody good? All right. We take those risks, and what do we do with them? You plug them into a risk impact analysis matrix. All right? It's something that I made up using ISO 31000. You're not required to get that standard. Okay? Not required to have that standard, but it's a pretty doggone good standard for risk management. Okay? Here's what it looks like right here. So we took our purchasing process, the one that we were looking at just a second ago. We took our purchasing process and we had the process owner kind of identify the risks that could possibly exist in my purchasing process. See that right there? Guys, I just picked 4. There's probably many more that exist. But they select, maybe there's a potential for an error in supplier pricing. Or maybe there's an error in vendor qualification. Here's what those mean right here on the side. Maybe there's a problem with having people qualified to purchase. Remember in our example, the computer systems or the NC type hardware that we might have to procure for our business. Maybe that's a problem. Maybe there's an error or a risk in incoming, receiving inspection. Okay, remember that was on the back end of the purchasing or procurement process. See, and guys, we're doing this, the process owners are doing this for every process in your business. If you do it that way, it makes it really, really easy because the process owners probably are already doing it in their head because they're sick and tired of all the problems that exist in their process. Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah.
Come on, guys. Just shout them out when you know them. It's okay. All right, so there's one way to do it. You assign risk is a combination of likelihood and consequence. What's the likelihood of that risk coming about? And what's the consequence if it does? All right, kind of the key down in the bottom left-hand corner, right in there. Likelihood, 1 is low, 10 is high. All right, and you just brainstorm and assign a value to it. All right. Well, let's see. Supplier pricing error. Well, that's pretty high right there. Again, I just threw some numbers at it to make the thing move for you just a little bit. Okay. Maybe not quite as high as vendor qualification, but it's still up there quite a bit. Then we looked at consequence. Consequence to operations, property, people, customers, or the environment. And we assigned a value 1 to 10. Guys, you're not required to do this by 9001. Okay? You're just required to analyze the risks for the processes. Remember the 9 steps? Okay, that's what tells me that you're responsible for doing it. Here I'm giving you a tool to use. You don't have to use it, but it kind of makes a little bit of sense, doesn't it? What do you think, Jerry? Yeah, okay. All right, so you assign numbers right there, add these up, get a sum right there. Now you multiply likelihood times consequence, that's going to give you the risk magnitude. Everybody see that? That'll give you the risk magnitude. Now, this one right here, the residual resistance to treatment. Well, we kind of talked about this last year. Remember when you go to the doctor and you've got the sore throat and the doctor gives you the stuff? And the sore throat, it gets a little bit better, but it doesn't quite go away. You know what I'm talking about? Okay? Well, there's a residual resistance to treatment. No matter what you do, that risk is going to persist. And some of them persist longer and stronger than others. So you assign, again, a number. Residual resistance, 1 is low and 10 is high. That shuffles the order and the sequence right there. And it's kind of surprising sometimes when you work through those, get your process owners to work through those, it's kind of surprising how all that works out. You prioritize them from highest to lowest right there. I copied this down from the presentation this morning. Wasn't that good, Alex? Yeah, it was pretty good, wasn't it? I copied this down from his slide. It was awesome. It says, the better we can articulate the risk, the more effectively we can focus our resources. Because we don't have unlimited resources, right? Yeah. There's a Dale's rule that says time exists so that everything does not have to happen at once. Oh, come on, that was pretty good. He also said focus on high impact areas this morning. I was delighted to hear that. Okay, so you take that, and your process owners do that for their individual processes, and then they can manage risk. Okay, now process auditing. All right, process auditing. ISO 19011. Did you know that there's an ISO standard for auditing? Yeah, it's ISO 19011. Yeah, I see some people nodding there. Yeah, ISO 19011. That's the ISO standard for auditing. In Annex A.2, I know we never read the annexes to stuff. Guys, I'd suggest you read the annex to 9001 and some of these other ISO standards, because sometimes the annexes are really, really helpful for us. Look at the Annex A.2 for 19011. It says the use of a process approach is a requirement for all ISO management system standards. It's a requirement. Auditors need to understand that auditing a management system is auditing the organization's processes and how those processes interact together. The International Accreditation Forum that gives guidance to auditors that work primarily for certification bodies, they give this guidance down on the bottom of the slide right there. They say that consistent and predictable results are achieved more effectively and more efficiently when activities are understood and managed as an interrelated process that functions as a coherent system. That's what the IAF says. So, what does this look like? Okay, some of you guys might have an annual audit schedule. Anybody got one of those? Okay, cool. You're not required to by 9001. Okay? It doesn't require you to have an audit schedule. Did you know that? Now, most of us do, because what the standard does require us to do, it's in that first one right up here. 9.2.1 requires us to conduct internal audits at planned intervals. Okay? It doesn't tell you how often you have to do them. And it's going to really vary by risk. And risk-based thinking is going to tell management which processes represent the greatest risk for my business. And do you think that those processes would be audited more often? What do you think? Yeah. So I go into places all the time and I see the annual audit schedule, and it's been that way for 10 years. Right? Regardless of economic environments or threats against the business that crop up or come and go, it's the same thing for years. 922A says that the organization is required to take into consideration the importance of the processes that are concerned, changes that could affect the organization. Hey, wait a minute. We've got some new suppliers here. Do you think that you might be auditing the supplier certification process more frequently if that's the case? Do you think, guys, these are actually pretty easy questions. Oh, yeah, you'd be auditing them probably more frequently. Changes that could affect the organization, results of previous audits. Hey, as a lead auditor, all I got to do is come in and ask you guys, hey, you guys ever had an audit? Let me see the results of the audit. And I find out the nonconformances that you had in the audits. And then I go back and I look at your audit schedule, if you've got such a thing. And I ask you, wait a minute. We found some nonconformances down here, and I don't see where you changed your audit schedule. Do you think that might be problematic? Anybody ever gone to the doctor and you get the checkup and the doctor diagnoses you with the problem? Do you think you're going to look at that more frequently now? Hello? Yeah. I hope so. Guys, I'd really like to see you guys again next year. So I hope we all get that one. Okay? Auditors, it says, shall be impartial. Have you ever heard the one, auditors shall not audit their own work? Who's heard that one? Can auditors audit their own work? What do you think? Who says? Who says? The 9001 standard does not say that. We took it out in recognition of small businesses. If you understand a small business, mom and pop, they do everything, right? The standard only requires that auditors be impartial. That's 922C. Guys, get those references down there. I'm coming to you right out of the standard. I didn't make this up just for you guys. Okay? So let's take a look at what that looks like. All right? Let's consider a lot of organizations will inspect. A few of the better organizations will process audit. Okay? So let's take our production process up here. Okay? Here's what I see a lot of people do right down here in the red column. Okay? They get their auditor and they go out and they inspect maybe some of the procedures, some of the work instructions. Then they might inspect a few of the products that are being produced. They might look at some of the calibration equipment and make sure that stickers are present. They may make sure that the checklists are completed, and oh my gosh, some of them even go so far as to make sure that the people are actually competent to do what it is that they're doing, right? Well, let's look at process auditing, because it's a different animal, okay? I'm giving you one idea right here. Keep in mind, guys, there's a million different approaches to this thing. You don't have to do it like this, but here's the way I've done it, and it's helped out a couple of times. All right? Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's take our production process. Let's say we start at the back end and swim upstream. We go to final shipping, and we record the data of the last handful of orders that just shipped out. Let's see, we just shipped out order number 101 and 102 and 110, whatever it is that we just shipped out. Where was it right before final shipping? It was probably in final QC and testing, don't you think? Let's go. Final QC and testing. We go to final QC, we verify the test records for order number 101 and 102 and 110 are in place. Where was it right before final QC? Probably in final assembly. Before we leave final QC, what kind of measuring equipment was used on those orders that just shipped out? 101, 102, and 110. Well, it's caliper number 10 and micrometer number 15 or whatever their numbers are. I'm just writing the numbers down. I swim upstream. I start to collect assembly instructions, verify document controls. Who did the work? Do they have any training records? What are the process risks and what are the metrics that show me how production is being run right there? Then I go from assembly to fabrication. I verify the manufacturing instructions are in place for those jobs that just shipped out. The job travelers, the job routers, the instruction packets. I need to see those for order number 101, 102, and 110, right? I get those records right there. What are the process risks? What are the metrics? Do the instruments used in production have calibration tags? Did we buy any raw material from any suppliers? Who was the steel supplier on order number 101 and 102 and 110? Oh, it was the ABC Supply Company and the XYZ Supply, and I'm writing those things down. Then I go back up maybe to order entry. See what I'm doing, guys? I'm just swimming backwards upstream. And I'm looking at some specific jobs. It's going to tell me how the process is working, all right? Because I'm just connecting the dots, connecting the pieces right there. So order entry. Let's take a look at order entry for order number 101 and 102 and 110, the ones that just shipped out. Let's take a look at the order entry documents for those. Did we get the customer requirements right? It was rejected in final QC. Why was it rejected? Well, because we didn't do this to it. Oh, you know what? We didn't fill that out in order entry. Okay? We're verifying records then. The last thing, all those records that we've collected. I need to see the purchasing documents, the purchase orders. I need to see that vendor X, Y, and Z are certified. Okay? I need to see the calibration records for this instrument and this one and this one and that one. I need to see training records and competency records for this person in final QC, this person in final assembly, this person in fabrication. See what I'm doing, guys? I'm just process thinking this thing. I'm doing a process audit, and I'm swimming upstream. So the process audit outputs. The outputs, like it says right here, feed into management review. Okay, that's 932C6 in the standard. Results of audits feed into management review. They also feed into the corrective action system. If I find a problem in the audit, it goes into my corrective action system because that's my method for solving problems and making sure that problems check in but they don't check out. They get solved and get addressed, right? Yeah. So speaking of corrections and corrective actions, half of you guys wanted to know about correction versus corrective action, and half of you don't care. No, that one was pretty good. That was pretty. No, half the responses said, hey, the difference between corrections and corrective actions. Okay, so why should I care? Well, in the ISO standard, only one place in the ISO standard does it use those two words, correction and corrective action, and it uses them in that one place outside of a note. It uses it in a note a little bit later, but only one place, and that's in 922E. It says the organization shall take appropriate correction and corrective actions without undue delay. Yeah, if those were the same things, guys, you know what? We would have put one word there when we wrote the standard and saved the toner. Right? But it's two things that it says, correction and corrective action. So what the heck is that? What's the difference in those? Well, you look at ISO 9000, the dictionary, and it tells you what the difference in corrections and corrective action is. Did you know that there's a dictionary, ISO 9000? Oh yeah, yeah. I chair the interpretations process for 9001, and 9000, believe it or not, the dictionary, most of the time when people are confused about a clause in the standard, it's because they really don't understand the dictionary definition for this word or that term. So let's see what the dictionary says about corrections and corrective actions. It's worded pretty similar, so you got to be careful. All right? A correction. That's an action to eliminate a detected nonconformity. Corrective action is the action to eliminate the cause of that nonconformity. Okay? One of them is a quick fix. That's correction. Corrective action is the permanent. Okay? So, what happens if I don't determine the root cause of the problems that I find throughout my system? As a part maybe of corrective action. Well, what you've just done is you've defeated a critical portion of your autoimmune system. Problems persist. The business system gets sicker and sicker. Well, there's a human system. You know, when we, in an early draft of the 9001 standard, some of my compatriots on TC 176 are going to hate me for this one. We actually, in 9000, we actually used a human body to kind of help to define what a system is. Well, guys, that's what this mess is right here. I know some of you were wondering what this mess is. This mess is a system. It's a collection of many different processes, okay? And we have an autoimmune system when we have a nonconformance, right? Yeah, have a little cut or an infection. Yeah, the autoimmune system kicks in and it fixes the problem. Well, the business system looks a little bit different than the human system right there, okay? It looks like a collection of many different processes. So 9001 has an autoimmune system built into it. Management review, internal audit, and corrective action. Management's job is to define the system, put it in place, and run it, and then you get auditors to go out and audit the system. Sometimes they find good stuff, right? Sometimes they find bad stuff. The bad stuff, they fix the problem. Management puts a new system in place and runs it, and then you go out and audit that new system. That's the continual improvement piece built into the standard. It's the autoimmune system. So if you don't fix the problems, if you just do a correction and not a corrective action, you've defeated a really critical piece of your autoimmune system. Does that make sense? And you wonder, gee, why are we not getting any better? Well, that's why. So management review. We've kind of looked at risk-based process management. We've kind of looked a little bit at process audits. We've talked a little bit about management review. Let's get that and transition it to strategic management review. And how do you do that? Well, the management review process. The purpose and intent of Clause 9.3 is to ensure that top management does a few things. Number one, ensure that top management does conduct management review. Well, that's 9.3.1. Ensure top management conducts a review in alignment with the strategic direction of the organization. Review information on performance and effectiveness of the management system and evaluate the effectiveness of things that you guys have done to address risk. That's some of the key input pieces to 9001. So let's look at the process for management review, because it's a process. It's one of those management processes. Remember from earlier? Yeah. So management review, just right out of the standard. No magic to this, guys. You can do this at home. All right? No magic to this one right here. These are just the clauses in the standard. You're looking at actions from previous management reviews, changes to the internal and external issues, performance and effectiveness of the management system. There's where corrective action and internal audits feed in, right in that subsection right there. Any additional resource that you need. The effectiveness of things to address risks and opportunities. We talked about that just a second ago. And then opportunities for improvement. Now, outputs for management review. Outputs from the management review should include evidence of decisions regarding plans, possible actions for improvements, changes to policies and objectives, additional resources that you may need, revised business plans, maybe changes to budgets as a result of conducting management review. Both of these come right out of 9001 and the International Accreditation Forum that gives guidance to auditors. So let's look at strategic management review. What would that look like? Well, inputs for strategic management review. In addition to the inputs that are specified in 922 in your 9001 standard, you might want to take a look at management system planning. Changes to processes and systems, things like that. The impact of changes that you've made in one part of the system on other parts of the system. Are changes evaluated before they are implemented? Remember, this is guidance that the IAF gives your auditor to come in and do an audit on you guys. How do you look at the context, and how does the context of your organization impact strategic planning? Include that in management review. Are processes needed for outsourcing identified? Inputs for management review, they can come from a lot of different places. Reports, trend charts, budgets, financial metrics. You want to integrate all these inputs as a part of an overall review of the business. This is kind of like your checkup or your physical. Both risk and opportunities influence the frequency of management review, also the scope of management review. Now, outputs. Outputs for management review. Not only related to improvements or changes, but you could also include decisions on other important issues, like maybe we need to introduce a new product. Maybe we need to be in a new line of business or new markets, or maybe a new strategic direction for the business. What are the risks for the management review process? Who owns the management review process? Who's that process owner? Yeah. It tells you. It's early in that section of the standard. It's the only time that the T word is used. Outside of Clause 5, it says top management shall. So that's a pretty good indicator that that's who the process owner. What are the metrics? Well, ISO and the IAF direct auditors to look for evidence that the inputs and outputs of management review are relevant to the organization's size and complexity, and that they are used to improve the business. There's the reference right there. If you want the reference, look it up for yourself. Down at the bottom, management review process should be an integral part of the organization's business management processes. So let's debunk some of the myths and then we're out of here. Some people think that there must be one annual management review. Well, that's not true. No, that's not true. Management review is required periodically. 9.3.1. Periodically, that could be weekly, it could be monthly, quarterly. Risk may increase the frequency, right? The timing of management review can be scheduled to coincide with other key business events, like the annual strategic planning thing, or the quarterly review, or the monthly operations update, all right? Include all of that together. Some people think that management review should cover all of the requirements in 9.3 in one meeting. No, that's not true. That's not true. The standard doesn't say that. While requirements shall be covered, there's no requirements to cover each and every requirement in each and every meeting. Some people think management review should follow the ISO requirement sequence. In other words, I do 932A and then B and then C. No, that's not true. You want to make the contents consistent with other management meeting agendas. See, people buy into what they're familiar with, right? I don't know about your companies, but the companies I see, a lot of them have that not invented here syndrome, right? If we didn't come up with it, it can't be of any use, right? Well, that's one way to get that buy-in right there. Okay? Some people think that management review is only done by ISO certified companies and only because that dadgum standard requires it. Doggone it. Well, no, business performance reviews are conducted by companies all over the world, irregardless of ISO certification or not. Some people think that management review records have to use the exact wording from the standard. No, they don't. As a matter of fact, it's probably better if you change some of the wording from the standard to fit your individual company. You know, you're allowed to do that. 9001 tells you that in Annex A.2 of 9001. Use the organization's language. Maybe you call it, instead of a management review, business segment highlights, challenges, improvement actions. It helps to get the buy-in, right, with top management. Because, see, they're probably doing it anyway, right? And so that gets the buy-in from them. Use the language of management, okay, instead of defects per unit, right? Talk to them about ROI or EBITDA. Okay, some of the financial measures and the financial measures, metrics, the cost of failures, that kind of thing. So here's what you guys wanted to know about according to the survey that went out. We covered risk-based thinking, process auditing, management review, and the difference between correction and corrective action. And all of this has been brought to you guys by Big Q Thinking. So only the best companies in the world have figured out how to overcome little q thinking and begin big Q thinking. Have you? Thank you, guys.